Hello, I'm Marie from Medical Channel Asia, and today I have with me a very special guest. Hello.
Hi, this is Raman Singh. I'm the CEO of Juniper Biologics, a biotech startup which started in 2020, and this is our third year of operation.
I see. So what is your background in healthcare like before you joined with Juniper Biologics?
So I have had experience being in pharmaceutical space for last 2 decades. I started my working career with Bayer. I was then at AbbVie, GSK, and just before Juniper Biologics, I was with Mundi Pharma. I started my career in Thailand, and then I've had experiences in Asia, worked in Europe, as well as in the United States.
Wow, you've got a really big experience in healthcare space. Is there any personal motivations or experiences that led you into this sector?
Well, I think, this I could talk universally. Somehow we are either connected because someone in our family has gone through pain, or we have been in the business that we have inherited. So I got into this space purely by chance. I was recruited out of the university. And then once I got into it, I realized that probably there is no better industry than healthcare, because you're truly making a difference. You're not only making a difference in your lives, you're actually making a bigger difference in people's lives. You're touching them emotionally, personally. So I think if I have to rethink the industry I would want to be in, it would be healthcare.
I see. So after being in Juniper Biologics for a number of years now, what do you envision Juniper to be like, and how has it evolved over time that you've been in here?
So before I get into what I envision for Juniper, I think my experiences have shaped me the way I am. I've worked in both the big pharmaceutical companies, a mid-sized family-owned pharmaceutical companies, and that really drove me to start Juniper in 2020. It was an opportunity that I wanted to create, to starting up a company that could focus on disease areas where I could make a significant difference in people's lives. So if you look at why did I select oncology, because cancer is the single largest growing category. There are a lot of big players in big time cancer diseases, but there are very few players in rare diseases. And that really motivated me to get into this area of oncology. And then one thing led to another. Immediately next to oncology was gene therapy. There was an opportunity of getting into that, and then rare diseases. So it all happened organically, but it started off with oncology because I really felt there was a huge unmet need and I could make a difference.
That's right. Actually, oncology, as you mentioned, there's really a lot of big players and there's a lot of drugs already. They are very old drugs. They're still working very well, and then there's a lot of people coming out with a lot of new drugs. So what kind of gaps are you looking at for Juniper Biologics to fill in this space?
Yeah, so one thing I was very sure of, that I did not want to get into generics. So I wanted to deal with innovative medications where patient population is relatively small, few hundreds to few thousands, which makes it very difficult for big pharma because it's not a very big opportunity. So they kind of don't want to get into this area. And that's the niche I wanted to create. So that was in the area of the disease or therapeutic areas. The second opportunity I saw was that there was no company focusing on emerging markets. So Juniper Biologics focuses on Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Middle East, Africa. You see a number of such companies existing in United States. There are companies in Europe, but there's no company in this part of the world. A lot of Chinese companies like to focus on China. A lot of Indian companies like to focus on India, and the same thing goes for Japanese and Korean companies. They're quite domesticated in the markets that they're operating in. There are very few companies, or in fact there is none, that actually has got a geographic footprint the way Juniper has.
That's true. Yeah, I think, as you rightly mentioned, there's actually many people, because they are looking at the amount of volume that they can get out of the sales or out of the patients that they can touch, right? But that's a reason why also many of these like smaller diseases or less well-known diseases, they are not as well researched. So of course that also comes with its own like difficulties in terms of like production, in terms of research. So how has it been like in the past few years, and how has your company kind of overcome these?
So I think one of the advantages of starting Juniper in 2020 is I knew the pitfalls in the industry. I knew the areas I want to avoid, and the areas that I want to focus on. So Juniper doesn't own any manufacturing, so we are a very asset-light company. Not many, even the big pharmaceutical companies want to get out from manufacturing because it locks in a lot of working capital, resources, etc. So we don't have any production houses. We work with different either contract manufacturers or principals from whom we have acquired the products. We focus on commercialization, so we've got our own sales, marketing, regulatory team, and a product development team. That's what we focus on because I think we can bring in maximum value in this space.
I see. So you're kind of trimming down on some of the parts where you can bring to other manufacturers or for them to focus on, and then you can focus on the things that really matter.
Precisely, because I think focusing on commercialization basically brings in a lot of value because it educates different stakeholders, be it healthcare practitioners or patients. And secondly, it helps us to really make a difference in terms of making sure that access to care reaches as many people as possible. As you can see in this part of the world, access is a big issue. If you take out the markets like Singapore, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, most of the other parts of Asia, access is primarily the biggest gap that patients have. So it helps us control that particular part of the business as well.
Okay, so before we go on to the next part of Juniper, which is gene therapy, I just want to maybe bring back the focus to oncology, and what are some of the oncology solutions that your company is currently focused on or currently bringing to market?
So the areas where we are focusing on, are primarily 3 or 4. One is around chemotherapy-induced nausea, vomiting. So every cancer patient that undergoes chemotherapy have got a major side effect of nausea and vomiting. We have best-in-class medication for it. In fact, it's on all of the guidelines worldwide as the therapy to go through the brand called Akinzio. We are into skin cancer, which currently is a brand new product. There is actually no solution for patients who have this particular kind of skin cancer. This particular product, which is called Ledaga, which will be launched in Q1 next year, it is undergoing registration, will be the first in its category. So it will make a huge difference. We've also got a tumor profiling tool called Caris. So every cancer patient, before the patient gets onto any medication, they do a tumor profiling to see what will work, what will not work. And basically that's something that we are doing in this part of the world. So that's the focus on oncology.
Actually, Juniper Biologics is also really into gene therapy. Is there any particular reason why?
Yeah, I think this particular area is very personal to me. I lost my mother in 2018, and just prior to me losing her, she had undergone a knee replacement surgery, and her rehab took a lot longer. She was on the wheelchair for a long time and never really recovered completely. She, after that, started walking with a walking stick, and really the solutions available out there are far and few between. So people who have got a knee pain actually either go for injections that can give them temporary relief or have to go in for a major surgery, which basically means changing the knee. There is nothing in between. And I came across this particular product that I was very well experienced with. I launched this drug when I was at Mundi Pharma in Korea. And I had an opportunity of acquiring this drug. And basically, it is one injection, one shot in the knee, and you don't need any knee replacement. There is data already for 8 years that's been generated that it could be a pain-free survival for the patient who's getting this, and that prompted me to get into this particular category. Apart from it being a huge category, apart from this part of the region having a very large potential because it's the largest aging population that's around the world. 60% of older patients above the age of 60 live in this part of the world. So that prompted us to look into gene therapy.
Maybe you want to talk a little bit about the challenges in terms of research and also in terms of the commercial side of things.
Yeah, so the challenge of rare disease, the biggest is the identification of patients. It goes with the definition because as the disease is an orphan in most of the cases, the patient population many times don't even get diagnosed. So once they get diagnosed, it's easy to go and tap into it. So the first challenge is, how do we identify these patients? Second, the hurdle rates for getting a positive clinical trial is relatively high, because the regulators around the world need certain statistics. They need certain number of patients that this drug needs to work, and only then will they give an approval. So we need to work very closely with the regulators to ensuring that they set up realistic hurdle rates for us to kind of venture into it. And lastly, the commercialization part. By definition, because the number of patients are really, really small, there's always a trade-off in terms of how do we price this drug versus how many patients can take this drug. And that's where the challenge is, where the access becomes an issue. If you price it too expensive, markets like Australia, Singapore, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, which is state-funded, reimbursed, it's less of an issue. But markets like most of Southeast Asia, India, a lot of Africa, it's a private pay market. So it's a balance, and how do we make sure that we balance the price, that the richer countries afford this, but at the same time we lower the price in poorer countries so that the access and affordability is not of an issue.
So thank you so much, Raman, for your sharing today. We've really learned a lot about Juniper Biologics and about the field that you've been looking into and all the work that you've been doing for our patient community.
Thank you. I feel very fortunate that through Juniper Biologics, we can play a role in improving lives of patients and focus on disease areas where I think not many players are actually focusing on, and hopefully we can transform patients' life as we move along.